Get started. There's a couple more people joining, but we'll get started in the meantime. Morning, my name's Opash, and I'm on the marketing team here at Bridgell. I just wanted to thank you all for joining us for our data-driven organisation session. Thank you all for being here this morning. Just a quick note before we get started. So the session is being recorded, and the slides will be sent out to you after the event. So if there's anything that you want to catch up on, or if there's any colleagues or whatever that couldn't make it that you want to share them with, you can do that later. You will notice that you are on mute, but we do encourage you to use the chat function to ask any questions, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the session. We'll try our best. We don't want to disrupt the flow too much of the actual presentation itself, so there's a dedicated Q&A at the end, so the guys will pick any questions up there as well. So don't think you're getting ignored or anything like that. It's just we'll kind of move them to the end. So I think that's all the points kind of covered to get us started. So what I'll do now is pass you on to our team of experts. So we've got Mark O'Donnell and Grant Redgate who will be running the webinar this morning. So thank you very much once again. I hope you enjoy and find the session useful, and I'll hand it over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Opash. Morning, everyone. I'm Mark O'Donnell, and I'm the Head of Analytics and Applications here at Bridgell. And as Opash said, I'm joined here today with Grant. Grant's a senior consultant in my team. So let's get started, I guess. This is the agenda for today. We'll cover each of these points in some way. Some are a bit more in depth than others, and we've only got a limited amount of time, hopefully, 30, 40 minutes or something to get through this. Because we've got a limited amount of time, we can't cover everything in depth, so I've got to pick a few things and hopefully pick some of the more interesting things to dive into. All feedback welcome at the end. If you think there's something else that should be included or something to do a bit differently next time or something more in depth, then please do reach out and let me know. We're going to start with data strategy, but before we do that, I'm just going to give you a quick intro to our company, Bridgell. We are based in Glasgow. We have 44 members of staff, although we are actually currently recruiting for a few other roles. We were established in 2002 and just celebrated our 20th anniversary last year. There are 4 key business areas within Bridgell. Our modern intelligent workplace, where we focus on improving employee productivity and satisfaction. Managed IT service and support that covers security, infrastructure, cloud services, that kind of thing. Analytics and applications, which is my area, where we support and develop large-scale bespoke software solutions and cover business intelligence, MI, data projects, that kind of thing. And then finally, we have got Trevi, which is a suite of product solutions focused on the water utility sector. Generally speaking, we advise, implement, and support technology solutions to help improve businesses. So I'm Head of Analytics and Applications, so just a bit more of a look at my business unit. These are the services that we offer, broken down into 4 key areas. Data strategy and advisory, where we provide consultancy, advice and guidance. Reporting, audit and health check, where we focus on specific pain points or provide benchmarks on how customers are performing. Building and implementation services for all data platform, data warehouse, all that kind of stuff. And data governance and management, which is probably where this sort of webinar today falls into. So support customers to deliver great quality end-to-end solutions. We are a 10 times Microsoft Gold partner and Microsoft Certified Solutions partner. We are ISO 9001 and 27001 certified and hold the government-backed Cyber Essentials Plus certification. This is a selection of some of our customers across private, public sectors and across a number of industry verticals such as manufacturing, housing, national government, NHS, utilities and events. And that's it for the kind of salesy part of this, I suppose. So I'm sure you're all glad to hear. So data strategy, before we start, Zopash I think is going to put up a quick poll just to try and understand a wee bit about everyone's backgrounds, quite a varied kind of bunch, I think, on the call. So just to understand a bit more about kind of what you think your sort of data capability is before we sort of launch into talking about our sort of view of the world. And it'll probably be interesting to sort of come back and look at some of that towards the end of this as well. So let's get started in while you're kind of filling that thing in. So, data strategy. You can never have enough strategies. That seems to be the way that a lot of people think about things. Most organisations certainly have got a few, and do you really need another? And why do you need it? I suppose that's what I'm going to try and explain. Well, data strategy is a key part of becoming data-driven. Put simply, it's the highest level of definition of what you're going to do and roughly how you're planning to go about it. As an organisation investing in the processes and technology to become data-driven, you really need to create and communicate a vision that everyone in the company can get behind, and that's usually in the form of a data strategy. I'm going to define exactly what I mean by data-driven in a minute, but it's likely to involve a fair amount of change for most businesses. So changes to the way you collect data, changes to processes involving data, changes to how you access and look at data. The purpose of this strategy is to define all of that and understand what is that high level view, what's my view from 32,000 foot, how will my business look in 1, 3, 5 years from now, what are the benefits and why are we doing it, and how will it make life better. Ideally, it should be owned at the top level of the business to ensure senior stakeholders are aware and bought in. It's quite an important point, that. It gives a chance to paint a picture and allows everyone in the organisation to understand what that looks like. Probably, most importantly, one of the most common reasons for failure in projects like this is when there's no high-level management buy-in. Because there tends to be quite a lot of change involved with changing a business to work like this. You really need that management buy-in. You need the clout of management behind you. It's not something that an individual can or really even should try to manage on their own. So once I've got my data strategy, what am I going to do with it? Well, the idea is that it should be used like a map. It should tell you where you're going. It becomes the map for the organisation against which decisions can be tested. Each project which requires an investment in technology should be mapped against the strategy, and it should ask, does this move me closer to where I need to be? So each project that runs in the technology space will be responsible for moving part of that landscape forward. The approach can be thought of as a, excuse me, the approach can be thought of as a next cab off the rank, will move me closer to where I want to be. And it moves you towards that desired end state using subsequent projects to do so. It's more about the journey than the destination. It's a continuous improvement process where each decision moves you closer to perfection, whatever perfection is for all definitions of it. It should start to become apparent that if you don't have the overarching vision of where you're trying to get to, that's the bit the strategy describes, it would be easy to miss this, and projects could actually make your landscape worse. This is something we see all the time. Disparate systems which ultimately make an integrated approach a little bit harder than it really needs to be. And then just some final words about the need for this. So these facts were all thoroughly researched, well, over a period of about 10 minutes on the internet. On average, every person on the planet is producing 1.7 megabytes of data a second. That's a little bit, for those of you who are as old as me, that's just a little bit more than the floppy disks that I used to use at the start of my career. As a species, we generated 44 zettabytes. What's a zettabyte here, you ask? That's 1 billion terabytes, or basically a 1 followed by 21 zeros. So we generated that much before 2020, and we're expected to hit 175 of those things by 2025, and I'm sure it's not all just funny cat videos. That's a few orders of magnitude higher than anything that's gone before. And if you really wanted to torture yourself by downloading all that from the internet, it would take you 181 million years, which is quite a long time. So I put these stats up, but they should probably be taken with a bit of a pinch of salt. But they do highlight the extremes, but they clearly show that there's a lot of data around and it's only growing. Every interaction that anybody has nowadays generates a lot of data, and much of that data has useful information contained in it. So coming back to the point of this, how can you possibly deal with that? Well, gut feel, maybe. That probably depends how big your gut is, but for sure though, the kind of things like spreadsheets and manual processes, you just aren't going to cut it when you get to not even these volumes of data, but towards them. So over the next few years, there's going to be a big push, and we already started seeing this happening, but there's going to be a big push towards automated data processing. Machine learning and AI will become prevalent. They are becoming prevalent. And really, to be successful in this world, it's necessary to understand your capability and employ good practices so that you can be sure you're getting the best efficiency from your data. Your business, so your data is a business asset that if you treat it right, it'll pay for itself over time. So that brings us on to the basics and building a culture around about data and starting to leverage it. So now we've got the strategy bit out of the way, let's define what we're trying to achieve. So there are a number of definitions of data driven, and we've got the same kind of things at the core, but this is how I define it. So it's about consulting the facts. It's about taking actions based on those facts. And then it's about re-evaluating those facts to reveal the impact of your actions. And then it's about doing that again and again and again and across different levels of the organisation and getting more efficient at how you do it. So the more you do it, the more efficient you'll become. And the better your whole business will become at understanding the key driving factors. It can be thought of as gaining an understanding of the levers that control your business. And doing it efficiently, whatever that actually means. And at every level in the organisation is key part of becoming data driven. There are many things to consider along the way. Following this kind of methodology will reveal gaps that will need to be filled. So for example, you might not have all the data that you need, but really being data driven is more of a process. It's not really an end state. If you do it correctly, your business ends up treating data as an asset to the company, knowledge base, if you like, of what your company does and how it does it, that can be exploited to hopefully great benefit. As analytics becomes more commonplace, the trend is towards shortening the timescales from collecting data to acting on it. And that's moving us more and more in the direction of real-time analytics, which we're beginning to see pop up a fair bit now. But the basics apply across all of these things. And just as it's important to say what it is, it's probably important to say what it's not. This is something that I just kind of put in because I sometimes feel that these conversations go in the wrong direction. When people talk about becoming data-driven, the discussion usually turns to, well, we'll create a dashboard for this or a report for that. Well, it is about getting data to people so that they can see what's going on. And some of that is about visualization of data, which is an entire subject in its own right. It's not the be-all and end-all what we're looking for. Probably the most common behaviour I've witnessed while doing this is when some companies look at the data that's been carefully gathered, curated and presented, and then completely ignore it and make a decision based on gut anyway. But we also have see a bit of an alarming tendency to start reaching for the toolbox of fancy graphics and then cobbling together Excel spreadsheets that summarise 100 other Excel spreadsheets and are held together generally by string and sticky tape. Not a very repeatable process, really. Mostly they come down to good intentions, but lack of knowledge. And what I have seen is being pushed by senior management to implement a data-driven approach. You know, we get senior execs who suddenly decide, oh, we're going to become data-driven, just make it happen. And that's really not what this is about. You need to have the kind of framework and the forethought in place, and that's really what we're talking about just now. So start to draw out some of the important bits, and these apply to data full stop, but it really comes across as part of this. So if there's any hint that data is not right, it's going to undermine everything you do. Any effort you put to get it there will just be thrown away. Checking often and having processes in place to address accuracy are absolutely essential, probably above anything else. If people lose trust in your data, then it won't be used. Same with completeness. Not really much point in having something like a 360-degree view of sales within your business, only to find that your supply chain is a black box. You know that your best-selling products are flying off the shelves, but you've got no idea that you're about to hit a supply chain block that will stop you selling it. And then lastly, it needs to be in the right place at the right time. If you've got a leadership team meeting every Monday morning, first thing, you need the data to be in place every Monday morning, first thing. Otherwise, it's just going to undermine the work you do to get it there. If it's not available at the right time, something else will fill that void, and usually with an Excel-based alternative. So those important points out the way. How can I tell if I've got a data-driven culture? Well, it's not a yes or no answer, really. It's a spectrum. At the bottom, you've got people who've never heard of of any of this, who gather data usually when someone asks for it or there is a problem, and don't have any processes in place to do it regularly or consistently, and sometimes don't even really understand the need to do it. At the top, you've got the perfect situation where data is carefully gathered, groomed, and nurtured to create a business asset that can be exploited by whatever the latest technology is, be that machine learning or AI or whatever the next latest and greatest will be. So it kind of leads me on nicely to talk about what we call our data-driven spectrum. We use this to classify organizations into a level that can help them understand what analytics will add value to their business and how they can move to where they want to be. That's what we call their desire level. So these are the levels in our data-driven spectrum. We'll come on to define what each of these mean and what you can expect at each. That's what Grant's going to talk about. But for the moment, it's enough to know that they exist in increasing complexity from the lower left to the upper right on this picture. We can place most companies on this somewhere and have a method of working through your organization to get a classification. But before we do that, just one last thing about that earlier point about desire. I've been talking about data, how you might incorporate it into the decision process, and that your classification of data is a spectrum, not just yes or no. It's kind of reasonable then to assume that your location on the data-driven spectrum will determine the capability that you should be able to support. It's important to understand it doesn't mean you can't do other things, and I guess this is a bit of a kind of cautionary thing. It means that the more you align your capability with your desire, the more effective and therefore cost-effective your use of data becomes. And just as a kind of small example, artificial intelligence, it's only as good as the data it sits on top of. I've heard a few people think that's beginning to sort of, people are beginning to understand that now. But increasingly, we're finding that even Microsoft Copilot deployments are being limited by the storage of documentation on SharePoint. Old data that you've forgotten about, half-completed documents, security by obscurity, and by that I mean, documents which are kind of not accessible on SharePoint and get forgotten about and get hidden away because people can't find them, all suddenly become available to Copilot, meaning that anyone trying to use Copilot has to deal with suggestions being thrown at them that aren't ideal. So they see all of this hidden stuff behind when they ask a kind of simple question. And it means that it reduces the effectiveness of how they can use Copilot, because they have to weed out and think about all the rubbish data that they're actually seeing. And all of that makes it a struggle to add value to your business. So the point I'm making is that you can implement AI without spending any time preparing the data that you depend on for it, but it will not be as effective as it could be if your data was well curated. Definitely not cost effective. With all that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Grant, who's going to take you through the spectrum in a bit more detail to help you understand the capability associated with each level. So, all yours, Grant.
Sorry, try that again. Thanks, Mark. So you've seen the different maturity levels. Now I will take you through them in more detail. Then I'll use 2 case studies to demonstrate how you would use this methodology in a realistic setting. So let's equate data to building blocks to visually explain the different levels. Without the help of an instruction manual, it can become difficult or now impossible to be able to build any structure of note. So if you gave me a few bags of blocks and asked me what could I do with it, I wouldn't be able to tell you offhand. Therefore, I'd need to organize the blocks to get a better understanding of what is possible. The process might look something like this. Starting with tipping the blocks out of the bags, I could tell you how many blocks I had in each of the bags and how many I had in total. Organizing the blocks into colors, I could tell you how many blocks of each color I have. Further organizing the blocks into types and understanding the properties of each piece, I could start building structures and then beginning understanding why and how the different pieces work with each other. By fully cataloging and analyzing each structure built and block used, I could design new and more complicated structures. Finally, at this stage of block and structure understanding, I have a comprehensive understanding of what is involved in building the structures, I can now start suggesting new block designs and provide intricate building instructions on how to build the new structures with a comprehensive list of blocks required. This is roughly how you would typically work with data. Using this analogy, you can see how the different levels Mark showed earlier relate to the building blocks. To summarize what is required to be at each level, you get the following. Disparate has data that is isolated and managed in a rudimentary manner. Aware recognizes the value of data and starts consolidating it. Structured establishes formal data management processes, and the data is now fully centralized. Managed enhances the data governance practices introduced and implements processes to immeasurably check the quality of the data. Optimized now has a fully integrated data ecosystem. Ideal data governance are a business culture that contribute to the making it a habit part of the life cycle, and continuous process improvement is part of the growth KPIs for the business. At each level, more and more advanced analytical insights are unlocked. Knowing how to achieve the different levels is only the first part of the process. Knowing how to fully utilize the unlocked analytical tools is the actual goal. From what we know about each level, it can be expected that the more basic and simple analysis can be done at the lower levels, while the more advanced analysis, simulations, and predictions can be done at the higher levels. If it is not immediately obvious, it is worth noting that what you unlock in the previous levels is available at the higher levels, and what I will describe for each level is only what is available that the previous level didn't have. All right. At Disparate, you can expect basic descriptive analytics, which that tells you the what has happened in the past. At this level, analysis is typically done in spreadsheet type software, and reporting is very manual. At the aware level, you can expect more advanced descriptive analytics with more advanced reporting and visualization. With data being more consolidated, you can develop ad hoc reports easily. With a more advanced understanding of the what has happened in the past, you can start applying some rudimentary trend analysis. Moving on to structured, we get diagnostic analytics, where we start understanding the why something has happened. This encourages drilling down and exploring the data to understand the detail behind anomalies, like why has sales declined. Additionally, you can make certain correlations and perform meaningful statistical analysis. As you get to the higher levels, we start becoming more forward-looking focused. In Managed, we begin using predictive analytics, which attempts to determine what is likely to happen in the future. Additional software tools can be used to aid in providing more advanced forecasting predictions, which becomes another source of data that you will incorporate into your existing reports for your decision-making process. Upon achieving the highest level of data maturity, you unlock prescriptive analytics. This takes predictions to the next level and actually provides suggestions to give you the highest probability of achieving the predicted outcome. Additionally, at this fully integrated data ecosystem level, it becomes easier to deliver real-time analytics. Understanding the data maturity framework a bit better, let's apply it to some realistic scenarios. For our first case study, we have a client who is an established retail company. They have scattered data across multiple systems, a point of sale system in store, separate online sales platforms, customer feedback forms, and Excel spreadsheets maintained by different departments. They haven't standardized their data definitions. Data isn't stored centrally and have minimal data governance. Their goal is to begin recognizing data as a valuable asset and start consolidating the data sources to improve reporting and decision-making capabilities. They also want to create standardized reporting with some advanced statistical analysis. Based on what we know about the client's current situation, we know that they are at the disparate level and their goal is to get to aware. However, they are also requesting features in structured, which is 2 levels above where they are currently. It is worth noting, utilizing features at levels you haven't achieved yet yields no guarantee that the specific features will be possible. And there would be an extremely high likelihood that the feature would be hacked, and fall into the trap of the sticky state solution that Mark mentioned previously. And this leaves the client with an inflexible solution that is prone to errors, inaccuracies, and very much not scalable. The best course of action is to only progress one level at a time to ensure the most efficient progression. With 2 levels being requested in this case, the recommendation is to remove the structured features from the scope and move that to a later phase engagement. To progress to aware, we will conduct a comprehensive data inventory to identify all data sources, their formats and locations. Consolidate the data from different sources into a centralized data storage solution. Establish basic data governance practices such as defining data owners, creating a data catalog, and implementing data quality checks. And finally, develop ad hoc reporting capabilities to provide the business with insights and visualizations. Once completed, you can expect that the data is centralized and standardized, enabling more accurate and timely reports that will lead to better business decisions. Management and staff will now have better visibility into sales trends, customer behavior, and inventory levels. For the second case study, we'll show you how this framework can be applied to a more data mature client. Here we have a client in healthcare that runs multiple clinics and manages all of their processes and data from a main head office. They have implemented formal data management processes. They have a centralized electronic health record system and have established data governance frameworks. They have basic data quality management practices, and they have adequate reporting and analytical capabilities. The goal is to implement predictive analytics to better support their clinics with supplies and patient diagnosis and treatment to avoid running out of supplies and to minimize readmission rates. From the requirements, we can see that the client wants to move from structured to managed. All requested features will be available after the progression to managed is completed, so everything requested can be included in this phase. To progress to managed, we will strengthen their data governance structures by defining clear roles and responsibilities, including appointing data stewards for different data domains. Implement advanced data quality management practices, such as continuous data quality monitoring, automated data cleansing, and validation rules. Develop advanced interactive scenario testing capabilities in dashboards that provide real-time insights and facilitate drill-down analysis. This can be achieved by using advanced BI tools, integrating with their electronic health record system. And then we will introduce predictive analytics and forecasting techniques to predict the patient outcomes, optimize resource allocation, and improve patient care. This involves training staff on the advanced analytic tools and techniques. Once completed, you can expect that predictive analytics can help in early diagnosis and treatment, leading to better patient outcomes. The advanced reporting and data-driven decision-making will improve operational efficiency, resource management, and reduce costs, especially with resupplying the clinics with the correct amounts of equipment. The improved data governance and quality management ensure compliance with the healthcare regulations and standards. Finally, before I hand over the presentation back to Mark, I would also like to quickly explain a scenario not shown in either case study. If a client were to approach us to develop certain features for them and we discover that they are already at the required level, we can avoid going through the progression steps and go straight into developing the requested features without needing to do any infrastructure-related developments. Right, that's it for me. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Grant. I guess, yeah, quite a lot in that there. And just to make a point, it was kind of one of the questions. These slides will be shared after the presentation, so yeah, it's maybe worth sort of taking a bit of a kind of step through that and just trying to understand the idea. But the point is that each level implies a capability, and we can sort of work up through them in a kind of cost-effective way. really to kind of round that off, and there's not, you'll be pleased to hear, there's not really that much more left now. Another 5 minutes should cover it off. Data processes and governance. Grant talked about the different levels in the framework, and hopefully it's given you a feel for capability versus desire and how it might play out. I just wanted to add a bit of an explain that we really see this framework as part of a wider process or set of processes. I'm sure everybody here knows that in any IT project, there can be a bit of a temptation to view technology as the latest and the greatest, and it's going to solve all your issues and it'll be the best thing since sliced bread. But in the real world, most issues tend to be related not just to that technology, but also to people and processes. So, and this data-driven spectrum and the stuff that Grant described sort of goes across all of that. So in the real world, you need to consider the impacts on people and how your processes are refined to deal with the evolution you're trying to bring about in your technology. Moving up the levels of a maturity model is not only a technology-related journey. It needs to be done in close consideration with the other factors in your organisation. And the way to control that impact is through governance. It's an important and often overlooked part of the journey. Without governance, you'll find you're applying technology to the wrong issues or not using it most efficiently by the processing of people that you have. So, you know, there are many companies who struggle to achieve good governance across data and analytics. And again, it's another spectrum. I keep talking about spectrums, but it's not there's a right way or a wrong way to do it. There are different levels at which it can be applied. And it's about a kind of journey from being uncontrolled to being more controlled. I'm not really going to say that much more about it because I could probably talk about this for days as well, and I'm sure that everyone's got coffee to get or something. But it's an important part of any data strategy for any company, and it's a large part to play in the control and readiness required to move across that data spectrum that Grant was describing. It's a fairly wide term, and it can mean different things to different people, and even defining what you mean by it and what it means to you and your company, because as I say, there's not necessarily a right way and a wrong way to do governance. There are some recommendations and good practices, but doing any governance is better than doing no governance often. If you don't recognise that you're doing it within your organisation, then in my opinion, you should be seriously looking at it and considering it. As we move forward into a world of more and more data and more automation, you'll find competitive advantage in knowing that you can trust your data and the processes that are around about it and exploit it without being concerned about the unknowns. There is a data governance guide on the website that we created earlier this year. Feel free to kind of download it and actually have a look at it. And then really finally, brief word on technology platforms to support it. This hasn't really been about technology or platforms or any of the kind of stuff that, you know, the more technical stuff. It's been a bit more governance-y and sort of control focused. But just really quick mention about some of the kind of tools that are used in this space on a kind of fairly regular basis. These are some examples. I'm guessing that a lot of people will be familiar with them. For governance and control, Microsoft Purview got up there. It will support things like data cataloging, lineage control, among other things. It'll allow you to share the definitions of your data across the organisation and help you on the steps that are necessary towards opening up your data as a shared exploitable entity for everyone to understand what you mean when you say, you know, when you give a definition to a piece of information. Power BI and Fabric, the report tool of choice. Obviously quite a lot going on in the kind of Fabric space these days. But moving towards that well-defined data served up via a reporting tool in an easy-to-consume format, it's a necessary step and a key step that it features on all of these journeys. Power BI can be used in many ways to support that, from actually reporting on your data. It's so reporting on your KPIs and metrics through to actually reporting on the quality of your data itself. You know, how accurate is it? How complete is it? How well formed is it? And it brings flexibility. And Power BI can talk to everything and be deployed in everywhere. It's a very flexible piece of kit. Azure Data Factory I put on there for control and orchestration. Often when you're working across a disparate landscape, you need to orchestrate and control across all of these processes. And that's Azure Data Factory's job. It's part of the wider Azure Integration Services, which offers a kind of suite of components and stuff that you can use for fine grained manipulation of data, which will scale from tiny to huge. And then finally, I did actually swither about putting Azure Machine Learning on this at all, because it's kind of, it's not quite against some of the stuff we've been saying, but you know, when you've got proper control of your data, then you know you can start to think about tools like Azure Machine Learning or AI Studio. They can help you to deploy and refine models that are unique to your organization of data. This shouldn't be a first go-to step for anybody. It's an advanced use case, and you should really only be thinking about that when you've got your data or a well-defined subset of your data well and truly under control. Yeah, don't just go and start playing with that. And then finally, I didn't put it on this slide because it's kind of like my nemesis, but finally I should mention Excel, the kind of Swiss Army knife of most businesses. It can be used to coordinate and document things like, you know, some of the facilities in Purview. You can do it in Excel, you know, with data mapping and catalogs and lineage, and it's a great first step. You know, if you've got nothing else, then that's a great approach. And Excel, despite some of my kind of jibes and sort of remarks through this presentation, is a great tool that can be used. Just don't use it for all of your reporting and visualization purposes, please. And that sort of brings me to the kind of end of what we've talked about. It's been a bit of a kind of meander through sort of process and approach and kind of strategy and the like, with a wee bit of this tool stuff thrown in at the end. So hopefully you've understood some of the key considerations around about, you know, what we think of when we say data driven, and what it means to become a data driven organization. Hope it's been useful. Any immediate questions, please stick them in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to reach out. Grant and I are both open to emails or LinkedIn approaches or whatever. As I say, the slides will be available after this. That's kind of mostly it. I'm just looking at the kind of questions. Can you explain a bit more about the data steward role? I don't know, Grant, do you want to answer that?
Sure, I can. So the data stewards is part of the data governance process that you would go down. So it is one of the many roles that you would define, but they are typically the people that are responsible for the data. So they are the gatekeepers, if you will, to make sure that when you're working with a bit of data, if there's something wrong with the data or quality checks need to be implemented, they are the people that are the sole responsible people for that bit of data. Anything you want to add to that, Mark?
Yeah, it's really about, I guess, it's mostly just about sort of having that as part of your framework and defining what you mean by it, and you know, putting in place processes that say, well, this person's responsible for that, or you know what. But yeah, I mean, like Grant says, it's kind of one of these key roles. You need to have people responsible for data, otherwise things just actually don't really work all that well. Okay, thanks. What else have we got? Copilot. Any other side effects emerging out? I think Copilot's kind of, I mean, it's obviously not this kind of subject. We do a bit of Copilot, mostly the modern intelligent work kind of guys. The kind of thing I mentioned about Copilot and, you know, deploying it on top of particularly SharePoint. SharePoint tends to become a collection of not quite rubbish, but it becomes a bit of a tipping pile for documents and old stuff across the organization. And it, I guess what we've seen both internally, because we use it internally, and with customers, is that, you know, suddenly having access to all that stuff can create some issues, including, you know, misdirecting you or giving you that extra level of work where you actually have to kind of go and sort of validate the results that are coming back from it. I guess really we don't see many other side effects from it. I guess it's just kind of defining use cases for it that is probably the most difficult part of it. It's, you know, being clear on exactly what you're going to do with it, and it definitely has got some really good things. You know, the capability for it from a, you know, to summarize meetings and documents and videos and stuff is great. I think the jury's still out in many of the other sort of areas, but yeah, it's changing all the time and it's improving all the time, which is something that we do see and we can almost measure. So I suspect it'll develop rapidly. But I think that, whatever you're deploying at the top of, that's really going to be one of the keys. Doing those kind of upfront exercises to get control of your data and understand what you're deploying it on top of, and cleansing your landscape of the stuff that you don't want it to have access to, is a kind of key part, as much as it is with all of the data we've been talking about today. Okay, every organisation is different. But have you any takeaways on how to influence the data culture for a low maturity org with low digital literacy amongst frontline care staff? It is a journey, but I guess it's probably about showing the importance, building. It's easy to say, but building data into processes. It's easy to say that, but maybe difficult to do it. I guess what we've seen kind of work, and it's not maybe been with frontline kind of care staff, but when things like meetings, etc., are crafted and built round about the data that's supplied from kind of analytics solutions, so what we've seen work quite well is, deploying Power BI and sort of weekly and monthly kind of meetings that are actually, they're driven by the dashboards and by the reports that are in Power BI. That has an almost immediate feedback. When people understand that you can take data and look at it in a live basis, but I guess that is maybe easy to do when you're sitting in a meeting room and around about a computer or something to kind of do that. But understanding that for any level, understanding that they're going to be managed on the data that is kind of present in a dashboard, it starts to kind of change the sort of mindset to a certain extent. And people then start to think, well, what do I need to do to get that kind of data changed? It's a long journey, and it's quite a difficult one. I don't know, Grant, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the one thing I was thinking, it kind of relates back to the data steward role. Probably the best first thing to do at the lower levels is just applying some sort of responsibility to key people. The main thing that I've noticed with some clients is if there's too many people contributing to the data, but no one person is responsible for it, when it comes around to the data is wrong or the data is being captured incorrectly, etc., there's no one key person who's going to go, oh, okay, that's my bad, I'm going to fix that, because it becomes a finger pointing exercise and nobody's actually going to do it. So that would be my one key takeaway if you do want to start driving a data-driven culture.
And I think as well, don't underestimate the power of making it easily available. When things like Power BI have got lots of tools now where you can put visualizations and graphics and things onto phones or tablets, which makes things highly visible, and allows people to kind of see that data quite easily without really having to go and find it. Because the easier that you can put it in front of people, the easier the access to all of these things, then the more kind of benefit you get from it. And that probably extends to the kind of data that you're putting out there. One of the things I tend to try and discourage people from doing is building any kind of analytics solution with extensive sort of security or role-based kind of access on top of it, because the more difficult it is to manage and deploy data, the less likely you are to be successful in getting it across the organisation. So my suggestion is always to focus on the stuff that everybody can see, and consider opening out all of your analytics to as many people as possible, so that it's easily accessible and people get into that habit of saying, well, let's see what the data says before we go off and do anything, rather than having to try and get access to things and consult the kind of the people with the crystal balls. Putting it on everybody's desktop and then everybody's device is a much better way of doing that.
And that's probably what we could add to the maturity levels, is the more intricate and complex security systems you should only start applying to the higher levels of the data maturity. Like Mark says, it just becomes more of a hindrance than anything else.
Yeah. So probably another hour-long discussion in that respect. Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's pretty much us. I think you joined us, Zopash, to say goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if there's no more questions, I think we'll probably wrap up there. We've kind of whizzed through that quite quickly today, but we hope you found the session useful. Just want to say thank you so much to Mark and Grant for an insightful presentation. As we said before, we will be sending out a follow-up with the slides and the recording. So if you do want to catch up, you want to refer to something later on, you can do. On the follow-up as well, we will be putting our details, contact details if you do have any questions. If you need any help with your data strategy, obviously the guys are here to help, and we can obviously take that further from there. We also have some other events coming up, which we have listed on our Eventbrite page. So I'll put a link to that in the chat as well, so you can have a wee look. We've got a session in our modern intelligent workplace department. We've got a session there, and we've also got a cybersecurity session there as well. So I'll add all that in the chat there. And also, I think Grant mentioned about the data governance guide. I'm just going to put the link into there too, so you can download that if you want to have a read or have any follow-up questions about that as well. But yeah, once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you at a session soon. Thank you so much.